And we walked past these markers all along Pandora Street and a few streets up there. So I guess it must come across that area.
There's
Another point is that before you're talking about estates using clean energy. Last year, or early this year, we drove across the northern states and I was amazed at the number of wind farms that we passed, huge wind farms. Third point is, because I went to a forum on Monday, I think it was downtown, I was interested and I happened to look up the Kalamazoo, information on the Kalamazoo spill, and my concern turned to horror. I recommend anyone, especially, I know I'm talking to people who are already concerned, but for those who aren't, if they saw that website, it certainly impressed me.
There's a YouTube video, just a short one, 7 minutes. If you Google Kalamazoo tar sands spill, it's really worth watching. You get a sense of how the people were devastated by it.
Another interesting thing with that was they had a time schedule as to events as they took place, and it was just horrendous. I mean, the mistakes they made, and that was Enbridge, and
yeah.
I guess it doesn't matter what company.
Yeah.
I would say there's no way it's too bad we have one pipeline already. I certainly don't want more.
Similar to what Michael was saying about pipelines is, like, usually the first response when there's a sudden drop of pressure in a pipeline, which would indicate a spill, is actually to turn up the volume to try to, because they
clear a bubble,
some sort of
clear a bubble, is it?
Right. So they usually in that process make the spill much worse than it would otherwise be.
They kept doing that a couple of times, I believe. Their warnings went off, and I think the flow was stopped. And they started it, on, I understand, one occasion and ran it for an hour. The alarms went off again and it was stopped. I'm not sure if that's an automatic process, but after some time they started again for 45 minutes.
And this is the pattern that you see all over the place with oil issues. Like the Horizon disaster that happened a couple of years ago. I mean, there were pieces of the rubber mechanism that was used to help prevent a blowout coming up in the wastewater that came up, and they just kept turning it off and on and off and on and off and on. The spill that happened in Alberta, was it last year, 2 years ago? They turned it off and on 3 times. Didn't even evacuate villages. You know, pregnant women getting sick and not knowing that they're being exposed to toxins. This is the pattern. This is the pattern. It's not a pattern of care. It's not a pattern of responsibility. It's the pattern of, yeah, absolutely.
On what that woman there said earlier, I was concerned as well. I live across the street as well, I own a condo, and I'm concerned with when the construction, forget about the spill. I mean, that of course is a horrible potential future thing, but when the actual construction happens, how is that going to affect property values? How are they going to protect us while they're building it? Because I had a storage locker down by the Port Mann Bridge, and just before they started to do the construction there, we were told we had to move out, and they started doing some construction, and I couldn't even go to the storage locker to clean my stuff out without getting sick. And that was just like a small little, some kind of little tiny pipeline that had to do with construction. So I can't picture what this would be. Is there any studies that relate to what happens in terms of, you know, the property values and the health of the people when they start the construction? How are they going to protect us?
It's an excellent question. There's a lot of questions like that.
Can I ask one question? Should we be as concerned about the liquid natural gas pipeline that's planned as we are about the diluted bitumen lines?
That's a great question. I think you should be concerned about it. I'm not, but you asked should we be concerned about it as the tar sands pipeline. No. I would say that the liquid natural gas is very concerned, and the fracking that is going on to feed that liquid natural gas in northeastern BC is very frightening. But I think tar sands oil is probably worse than liquefied natural gas. However, a lot of that natural gas is going the other way to the tar sands, where it's used in it's called SAGD, where they basically cook the earth enough, or the tar sands bitumen enough that they can pump it to the surface, or to blend with natural gas to or with the bitumen as condensate. So the natural gas exploration that's happening in British Columbia is very much connected to the tar sands.
How does your group get funding, Sven?
Sorry?
How does your group get funding, like Tanker or 3DC? Does it support presentation this week? Obviously that costs time and money. Are you able to
Besides my time, it's actually been very inexpensive and we do a pretty good job. We get some foundation money and we get some money from regular people like you folks who go to our website and click on donate.
Yeah. My biggest concern with these pipelines is the climate change carbon emissions factor, which nobody seems to be talking about for some reason. We talk a lot about spills, and that's a big problem. But I have a different question. It's got to do with, I guess, the economics that we talked about last night. How the West Coast markets are going to be paying $30 to $50 a barrel more for the oil. What's that going to do to, I guess, draw up the global price of oil? And will that mean that we're going to be paying more for it here?
Yeah, absolutely. At least that's what Robin Allen has said.
I mean, the Chevron refinery here in Burnaby, they have a contract that's going to expire shortly, and if they have to compete with other refineries on around the Pacific Rim, they're probably going to end up paying a higher price, and whether or not that refinery stays open is in jeopardy. The other point about the climate change is a great one. I don't know if you guys know The Onion. It's kind of a joke news site. They had what I thought was a hilarious article a while back that said the headline was "Tanker safely docks at destination, terrible climate or environmental disaster," and it's true. I mean, we really have to make the decision right now. We're at a kind of a turning point in our entire civilization. Are we going to start building the infrastructure so we can get off fossil fuels in 50, 60 years, or are we going to ramp up and go even deeper into that hole? So that's the decision you guys are making here in Burnaby.
We don't even have 50 years. I mean, it's like 20.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the
prefer
lifespan of big infrastructure projects is around 60 years. So that's why I say that if you build them now, you're stuck with them for that amount of time.
Yeah, my question is on the lifespan of the tar sands oil as well, especially because this is where the problem, I think, the source of the problem for BC in general is that we're extracting tar sands oil and selling it off. Is there any study that's shown how much oil there is in sort of the lifespan of that resources in Canada? The reason I'm asking for this is because these projects, what they're doing is basically increasing the rate at which we're extracting tar sands oil and selling it off. And there is, domestic market for oil here, which is something that can be looked into without necessarily putting the coast and the fisheries at risk of oil spills on these kind of things. But if we don't do that at the rate at which they're extracting tar sands oil, how much longer do we have for it? Because I find for these projects, opposing these tar sands is a way of telling these corporations that, hey, we gotta actually start looking into other ways at alternative energy. Because if we don't do this, what we're doing is defending the status quo and sort of kind of just chilling and saying this is how things should be.
I think there was a couple questions.
Well, the main question is how much longer do we, or how much tar sands oil do we have?
Well, so I guess for starters, I would say that not that long ago, it seemed ridiculous to people that we would ever exploit the tar sands for oil the way we are now. But the price of oil has gone up steadily, as I think all of you know when you go to the pump, and all of a sudden it started to look attractive. So there's a theory called the Hubbard peak or the bell curve, and basically when you get to the top of this kind of oil production peak, the price starts to go up exponentially like we've seen over the last decade, and you start going after sources of oil that didn't look that attractive not that long ago. So the tar sands we're starting to scrape at the bottom of the barrel and take the measly stuff leftovers of oil. we thought not that long ago that we were going to run out of natural gas pretty soon in BC, and then we invented fracking, and now there's a ton of more of it. But the environmental costs, the energy costs, the cost of those communities is much, much higher. So we might have enough oil to last for quite a much longer. I don't know whether our climate can take it. I don't think that the communities that live downstream of the extraction can take it.
Just because these two people just asked a question, I thought I would introduce them. This is Calvin and this is Alan, and they're from No Tankers. And No Tankers will be speaking on our event on July 7th, and they have their petition with them today. If you'd like to sign it, which I'm very glad to have them here today, so that they can join our little forum.
Yeah, the petition's, it's for the Kinder Morgan pipeline and for the Andrews pipeline, for crude oil exports. So far we've actually got 120,000 people across the country to sign it, which is actually probably the biggest environmental petition in BC. And we're hoping to target specific political ridings and get anybody, no matter what party they're from, for the next provincial election to speak out against these projects. Right? It's not against refining oil and using it here, but that's not a great option either.
Are No Tankers against all oil tankers that come into the Port of Vancouver?
Oh, you mean the existing ones, or increasing it?
All tankers carry an oil product out of Vancouver Harbour.
We are against the expansion of crude oil tanker traffic on the coast. So the current.
So you're just talking about tankers that carry petroleum products.
Carry crude oil products.
So you don't have a problem with canola oil tankers?
From the campaign standpoint, no.
So what's the difference?
Well, crude oil is a lot more toxic than canola oil. For starters, it's also, canola oil is used to cook vegetables and crude oil is used to cook the plant.
Well, we've had tankers going in and out with canola oil for 40 years. They never had an accident yet.
Well, there was actually, in the 70s, there was 2 crude oil tankers. Briefly, they experimented with, during the oil shock, exporting crude, light crude from and they had 2 accidents in less than a decade. So, there has been accidents in the past.
I don't know how many of you was lucky enough to actually have a map, but under the water all around Vancouver or Vancouver Island or in the Pacific West Coast. I'm one of the lucky ones who actually have a map and I can see, but the actually ocean floor looks like this on the side. I can't even imagine the rugged area that how you can really maneuver bigger tankers than we already have, because there is some places there is not even space to maneuver.
Well, I mean, because I think people have a hard time conceptualizing how big these boats are.
Are they gonna dig it out, all those rocks and all those things to make it bigger so they can go? Yeah. Are they gonna destroy all the wildlife underneath the ocean just to make sure that they're not gonna?
Yeah, the Port of Vancouver has plans to dredge the second narrow so they can bring in larger boats. They have done some exploratory dredging. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but they have been out there poking around, and that is their long-term plan, is to do that. I guess to put the size of the tankers in context, if you're familiar with downtown Vancouver, the current boats that are coming through, they're about as large as the Sheraton Wall Center in downtown Vancouver. And the proposed Suezmax tankers are larger than the Shangri-La building, which is the tallest building in downtown Vancouver.
Yeah.
Are you comparing the height of the building with the length of the
yes.
tanker?
Yeah.